Hi, Carol Blaney here with Chapter 2 of my physics book slash dissertation on a fluid dynamical approach to the unification of physical forces. Now, I'd love to jump right into my model for a light photon, which is a stable, self-propelling vortex of the ether. But before I can do that, we need to first understand what this ether is. So in this second chapter, I propose a model for this ether, or as conventionally called, the zero-point field. That is, I propose a fluid dynamics-based interpretation for the ether of this particular universe. But before I can understand what this ether is, I need to step back another step and know what the building blocks of the universe are. So I'll give you a 1-minute synopsis of what I propose are the building blocks of the universe. First, there was nothing, or the great void, the unnameable because it isn't anything. Next, something appeared. This is our universe. What are the rules for the something? Rule number 1. As soon as you have something, you have to have something else to compare your something to. Otherwise, you really have nothing. Rule 2. So now that we have something 1 and something 2, these are what I call the building blocks. Something 1 is place. Something 2 is stuff. Something 1 is place. What does that mean? Well, a convenient way to quickly understand place is to imagine a Euclidean grid, a grid that doesn't accelerate, and we say it's stationary. It's our Euclidean grid, and upon which we build our universe. We must have a place of reference, and so we all agree that this Euclidean grid is our reference point. And it's non-changing and kind of like, monkey bars. Something 2 is stuff. What does this mean? Well, a convenient, quick way for me to explain what stuff is that stuff is something, and something is ether. It is an ether somethingness that fills the place. And this ether has to be everywhere. There can't be a space where the ether isn't, because then that would be nothing, and nothing can exist. So everything in this place is filled with stuff. And said a scientific way, ether fills the Euclidean grid. And this is our starting point. So in summary, the basic building blocks of the universe are a Euclidean grid, which we use as a reference point, and 2, an ether which flows on top of this grid. And as it flows, the change of its position actually defines time. But we don't call time a building block because the building blocks are the most fundamental. The most fundamental is the ether and the grid and the ether that flows. So if you like, you want to add a third building block, you could call that time or change. So Descartes talked about the plenum, which to me, I think that's like an ether, a substance that's in space. And in fact, Aristotle also said something about ether, and Plato did too, and a lot of the Indian gurus also talked about things that are reminiscent of what I would imagine being the ether. Could it be that we're all programmed in our brains to imagine such an ether and perceive our universe with this etheric model? Even Einstein said there had to be an ether. In his book entitled Relativity, the Special and General Theory, a clear explanation that anyone can understand, sort of later in the book, he adds as an aside that there must be an ether because there must be something to carry the force. Now, if the equivalence principle is true, then you accelerating through space in a rocket ship is identical to space accelerating through you. And in fact, this space, which I call ether, is what holds us on the earth. Now, is that definitely something? It's definitely not nothing. It's something. Ether is something. And it accelerating through our bodies, it holds us on the earth. We're starting at this point of agreement, and it's because most people would agree that Einstein's equivalence principle is correct, and I'm starting from that point as well, and it's a fundamental truism. This insight that Einstein had is at the heart of his general theory of relativity. And this accelerating ether is identical to what others that follow Einstein call warped space-time. For example, if space-time wasn't warped, it would just sit there. The only thing that makes it warp is not even that it's moving in a constant velocity, but if space moves at an accelerated velocity, then space-time is warped. So near the mass of Earth, space-time is warped because the ether doesn't move in a constant velocity. It accelerates into Earth. Remember, it's the acceleration vector of the ether that has meaning. The velocity vector of the ether is not what we're up for discussion today. The velocity vector right now, as far as we know in our conversation, the velocity vector does nothing. Now later I might dare to challenge that, but for now we are going to keep this clean and simple and say the velocity vector is not relevant, because if you're moving at a constant velocity, you feel like you're not moving at all, right? I'll say that statement is true for small velocities. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, well, how can ether flow? I mean, ether is the vacuum, which is nothing by definition, right? So how can flowing nothingness be something? This is a good question, and I'll reply to you with 2 points. First, it turns out the vacuum isn't nothing. It can't be nothing because nothing is unstable, as a really great physicist taught in his book, A Universe from Nothing. Now, the vacuum of space is actually teeming with virtual particles popping into and out of existence. And these particles, while in existence, have some mass, they have some inertia, and they pull in space. Space accelerates in towards them. If you want to move it, you have to put energy into it. Anyway, back to answering your question when you ask me, well, how can ether flow? Ether is the vacuum, which is nothing by definition, right? How can flowing nothingness be something? And I'll reply with 2 points. I already gave you the first. The second point is ether can flow. Saying that ether can flow is really nothing new. It's just my choice of words that are new. But Einstein said the same thing when he realized that you accelerating through space is equivalent to space accelerating through you. The equivalence principle. Space accelerating through you. What's that? It's what gravity is in Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity. Space accelerating through you is what happens when you stand on a gravitational body, and that holds you onto the Earth. Most scientists call it space-time, and they say space-time warps near gravitational bodies, like planets and other heavy things. But bent or warped space-time is what I call etheric acceleration. So I choose to show a video of this 3D space, and then I just move it in time, and then you can really, really see it in all 4 dimensions. It's worth clarifying because I believe the future of clean nuclear fuel depends on our understanding of this concept.